Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Svarupaya Swami Tapaharini. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. My pranams to revered Swami Shuddhidananda Maharaj. My namaskars and regards to Professor K.N. Dikshit ji, Professor Durga Basu, and my namaskars and regards to all of you, my dear devotees and friends. Today we all have assembled here for this wonderful seminar, which is dedicated to the subject of the built heritage of India. And in this seminar, as it was pointed out by Swami Shuddhidananda Maharaj, that very eminent archaeologists, historians, and specialists are taking part, and they are going to put forth their views on this extremely important subject when you look at it from the standpoint of Bharatiya Sanskriti and civilization and culture. So, at the very outset, I feel like I should make a submission here that I am neither a historian nor an archaeologist, and I don't have any eligibility in a technical sense to speak on this issue. And yet I was accorded invitation to come and speak in this platform. So, left to me, I chose myself that I would speak on a subject which is very close to my heart and somewhat related to the subject of Indian heritage. And that subject is the subject of the building blocks of Indian culture, our heritage, our Sanskriti, our Sabhyata. What are the building blocks? So before I get into the subject of the building blocks of Bharatiya Sanskriti and Bharatiya Dharohar, the heritage, I would like to very profusely thank Professor K.N. Dikshit, who is seated here in our midst, and the likes of him, many other archaeologists who have dedicated their lives for the excavation of the real treasures which has direct bearing on our understanding of Indian history, the story of Bharat and the story of India. It's a very crucial area, actually speaking, for every Indian, everybody who's Bharatiya. So, what comes to my mind is, actually I have to thank to the organizers who have invited me to come here and talk on this issue, because when I started investigating, I found that how these archaeologists, they spend years together, decades of their sacrifice and toil and sweat to find out the hidden treasure beneath, just perhaps beneath our own feet. You know, India is a heritage country. Many people have described Bharat as an heritage country. It is filled with heritages, treasures hidden beneath the surface. And these archaeologists, they spend decades together in trying to find out what is hidden beneath the surface, and they bring it out. And when the truth comes to the light, then the world takes note of it. And the whole understanding of history, the story of India, gets a new light. So, actually speaking, as a citizen of in this country, we all of us, we have to be extremely thankful for this great research and the laborious kind of work which these professors and archaeologists, they are involved in, to bring out the truth of Indian civilization and culture. For example, if I just look into it, I see that Dikshitji was involved in bringing out the truth about the structure of Ayodhya, the truth about it. One of the biggest historical mistakes which had been committed, that historical mistake was corrected. Now, why Ayodhya is so important? Because Ayodhya is important for every Indian, every Hindu who stays in this land, because that is the place where Bhagwan Ram was born. Now, interestingly, all the European historians who had written Indian history, and we were made to believe that Bhagwan Ram was a mythical figure. Ramayana itself was stamped to be a myth. Mahabharata was stamped to be a myth. Bhagwan Krishna was stamped to be a mythical figure. In this way, a large section of Indian history has been put into the category of myths and mythical figures, intentionally. I'll come to that point later. And when such excavations take place, and when the truth comes out, what happens is myths become history. Myths become reality. So this is the great kind of, this is the real contribution which the archaeologists make towards this area of understanding India's history and its antiquity, its culture, its civilization. Myths begin to become history and reality. Just 2 years back, in 2019, as far as my understanding goes, there was a big discovery made in Uttar Pradesh, in Sanauli. Many of you might have heard about it, which again has shed immense light in the antiquity of Indian civilization. In tremendous light in understanding the Vedic age, understanding the society that existed at that time. So this is how what used to be stamped as myth is today, owing to the contribution made by great archaeologists of our country, it is becoming history, it is becoming a reality. In this sense, we can say that now, on the basis of these excavations, history is being rewritten. This is what exactly Swami Vivekananda wanted. He had recommended and suggested that Indians have to write their own history, and that should be on national lines. Swami Vivekananda very strongly emphasized this point. The history which we have been taught in our schools, unfortunately, they were written by the invaders, the conquerors of this land. And the history that we have been reading is the history of the conquerors, the history of the invaders, and not a bit the history of the people of this land, not the history of the Hindus. Where is the history of Hindus in our textbooks? It is filled with the history of the conquerors. So history is being rewritten, and in the process of rewriting history, these archaeological excavations have a tremendous contribution to make. And that is what actually, it makes me a bit, what should I say, emotional when I think about this connection between archaeological invention and bringing to light the glory of Bharatiya Sanskriti, Hindu Sanskriti, the Vedic Sanskriti, its antiquity, its glory. It is being put on paper with the power of all evidence and proof, scientific proof. Now, when we talk about history being rewritten, or the need to once again rewrite Indian history, we come to a very important point, which I would like to place before all of you, and that is, history is inseparably connected with the emergence of national consciousness. the national consciousness, the consciousness of being associated with a nation, and a sense of pride in being associated with a nation, that has got much to do with the kind of history which we are taught. For example, I would say, every nation has got its own history. Every nation has got its own story. Every race, every jati has got its own story, its own history. Suppose if we want to destroy a nation, the most powerful tool or the way to destroy a nation is you destroy the history, and the nation will begin to dwindle and it will be destroyed in course of time. If we want to destroy a race, the best method is kill the story of that race, and that race will begin to slowly dwindle and move towards destruction. This is the inseparable connection between history and the emergence of national consciousness, racial pride, national pride. Unfortunately, when the Europeans came to India, we all know that Europeans, I include not only the Britishers, the French, the Portuguese, and all of them. When they came to India, they confronted a great culture and civilization standing before them like Mount Everest. So great, magnanimous, absolutely uncomparable. They saw that compared to their Semitic faiths, what they saw in India, the Hindu Samaj, their system of thought, their day-to-day life based upon so many scientific things, it was simply spell-binding. They understood that this is a great civilization that they are encountering. And of course, the obvious response to such an encounter in most of the cases, because we are all frail human beings, that response will be a sense of complex. And they too were the victims of this complex, inferiority complex. And in order to present themselves as superior to everybody else, they planned that they have to prove to the Indians that Indians are inferior. If the Hindus have to be ruled, this majority community of this country, the Hindus, the Indians, the Bharatiyas, with a great civilization behind them, they understood the Sanskrit literature filled with scientific discoveries, empirical sciences, spiritual sciences, yoga, pranayama, Ayurveda, and what not. Nowhere on the planet we find such things. So they conspired. The best way to rule these people is to tell them their own story, but in a wrong way. Kill their history, kill their story, and that is how these people can be ruled. So they introduced their education system. They wrote the story of the Hindus, the story of the India, and they painted everything that is connected with the Hindu philosophy and thought system, everything to be superstitious. Ramayana became myths, Mahabharata became myth, the great figures of India all became mythical figures, and in this way, by giving a totally distorted picture of Hindu society, Indian society, they could brainwash the Indians for the last 2 centuries. That is why, unfortunately, if you just look into the present day, our young generation, boys and girls, they are English educated. They are very skilled. Wherever they go, in whichever part of the world, they are the best workforce which every country seeks. Wherever they go, they do wonderful contribution. But one thing, one big flaw which we usually see in them is that they lack a sense of Indianness. Many of them, they lack that sense of that pride for their Hindu ancestors, because they don't know the value of what this Hindu race has done to the entire world. It is not their fault. They have not been told about it. The story of India, the story of the Hindu race has not been given to them in the right fashion. And that is why Vivekananda had said there is an urgent need for us to rewrite the Indian history on national lines. Now, what is the true story of India? When we talk about Bharatiya Sanskriti, Bharatiya Sabhyata, and its true story, what is this true story? Of course, it would be too audacious for anyone to attempt to talk about the story of India in 30 minutes. So I'm not going to attempt to do that. But to sum it all, I can say that Swami Vivekananda's one statement. Swamiji very beautifully says in one place, describing the glory of Bharatiya Sanskriti, and when we talk about Bharatiya Sanskriti, it is essentially the Hindu Sanskriti. And when I use the word Hindu, I include everybody, the Buddhas, the Jainas, the Sikhs, and so-called Dalits and all these different sects. In fact, they are all Hindus. It is the Britishers who injected the poison into our minds, and they have created a division that as if these things are all separated from Hinduism. If you just look into the thought system of all different sects, they were all reformatory movements at different points of time in Indian history. They came into existence, but essentially they are all, the mother of all those sects are nothing but Hindus. So when I speak about Hinduism, I'm talking about the entire group of people who have lived on this Indian subcontinent. This point should be noted. It is not in a communal sense. So Swami Vivekananda says, what is the glory of this Hindu Jati or the Bharat nation as a nation? It is India is the cradle of human civilization, he says. Interestingly, Swamiji made this statement in 19th century when the Indus Valley sites were yet to be discovered. When Mohenjo-daro and Harappa had not yet been discovered and excavated. After the excavation of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa and the Indus Valley sites, today the world also knows that India is the cradle of human civilization. But much before that, in 19th century, Swamiji had made this observation. He said that India is the cradle of human civilization. And when we talk about Bharatiya Sanskriti as the cradle of all other Sanskritis, all other Sabhyatas, what is this Bharatiya Sanskriti made up of? It is made up of the Hindu people, their day-to-day lives, their actions, their belief systems, their philosophy, and everything. And what is the antiquity of this community? The people who lived in this Indian subcontinent. No one has been able to pinpoint the antiquity of this group of people who have been living on this Indian subcontinent with an unbroken continuity. History dare not peep into that realm of time, that antiquity where actually history can't reach. History melts into timelessness, truly speaking. Though Westerners have fixed the date of Rig Veda is 5,000 years old or whatnot, it looks to be very ridiculous. Indian history wound up in 5,000 years. 5,000 years appears to be a very small span of time in comparison to the truth, truly speaking, which in course of time these things will come to light. So this Indian society, its antiquity, no one has been able to fix. And everything we see has emerged from this so-called, this Hindu Samaj. Swami Vivekananda, talking about this, the glory of this people who lived in this subcontinent, he says that from here have started the founders of religion from the most ancient time, deluging the world again and again with the pure and perennial waters of spiritual truth. From here have proceeded the tidal waves of philosophy from time to time, covering the entire earth, east or west, north or south. Again, in another place, Swamiji says, if there is one land on this earth which can lay claim to be the blessed Punya Bhumi, the land of introspection and spirituality, it is Bharat, it is India. Again, in another place, Swamiji says that the debt which the world owes to our motherland, the debt which the world owes to India, Bharat, is immense. Taking country with country, there is not a single race on the face of this earth to which the world owes so much as to this Hindu race. Somebody talks about the glory of the Hindu race. The world owes so much to the Hindu race because so much has been given by these people who lived in this Indian subcontinent. Interestingly, Mark Twain, the great American orator, he also speaks about, in one context, he speaks about the glory of the Indian people. He says, India is the cradle of human race. It is that race from where all of the race slowly gained civilization and culture. India is the cradle of human race. It is a birthplace of human speech. Human speech, the Deva Bhasha, Sanskrit, Sanskritam. The people spoke this language. It was in vogue in the most ancient times when there was no culture and civilization in other parts of the world. India is the birthplace of human speech. Then Mark Twain says, India is the mother of history, the grandmother of legends, and the great-grandmother of traditions. Anyway, by going back to the subject of Bharatiya Sanskriti, I want all of you to understand one point. When we talk about Bharatiya Sanskriti to be the cradle from where all other Sanskritis and Sabhyatas have emerged, directly or indirectly, Swamiji in another place says that wherever there is any moral code, ethical code, any spiritual teaching, religious teaching, directly or indirectly, they have all come from the system of thought of the Hindus. Now, this Bharatiya Sanskriti, which is the cradle of all of the Sanskritis and Sabhyatas, it has got the Hindu society as its basis. Now the next question is, what is the basis of the Hindu Samaj? What went into the making of this Hindu people as we understand them today? That basis is the universal, scientific, eternal thought system of the Vedas. At the root of this Hindu society is a tremendous thought system of the Vedas, which is the science of life itself. It is this which actually governed the day-to-day lives and actions of millions and millions of the Hindus right from the beginning of this civilization. Now what are the speciality of this Vedic system of thought? Let me just come down to my main subject, the building blocks of Indian heritage, the building blocks of Bharatiya Sanskriti. What actually makes this Vedic system of thought so unique? I will just enumerate a few points. One of the most important teaching of the Vedic Sanatana Dharma is, Swami Vivekananda says, this is the keynote of the Vedic system of thought. What is that? The greatest utterance ever made in human history itself. And what is that? Truth is one. Sages call it variously. Ekam sat vipra bahudha vadanti. This is the central keynote, the very central rhythm of the Vedas. Swami Vivekananda says, just imagine, at a time when other civilizations and cultures had not even come into existence, what to talk about Semitic religions of Christianity, Islam and Judaism. At that time, in that hoary past, some rishi, maybe on the banks of the Indus, or maybe on the banks of Saraswati, or maybe on the banks of Ganga, he is chanting the Vedic hymns, and he is declaring to the entire world that the truth is one. Sages call it variously. And just imagine, the world has yet to accept and even understand this reality. Acceptance is still a distant probability. The world today in this 21st century, in 2021, even now the world doesn't understand the simple truth that truth is one. Sages call it variously. Is it not something very astonishing. Are we really advanced? Sometimes these questions do pop up in our mind. Merely technical advancement, does it make us really advanced? This great understanding about the ultimate reality, that it is one, we may call it by any name, doesn't matter. Is the 21st century humanity understanding this? Let alone acceptance. So, Swami Vivekananda says, this is the keynote of the Vedic system of thought. And if the truth is one, what is that truth? That truth is divine, divinity. It is pure consciousness. You may give it any name, doesn't matter. Names don't really make a difference, but it is pure consciousness, it is divinity. And this divinity is in the core of this creation itself. It permeates this creation. And if this divinity is permeating this creation, it is present in everything. Then the Vedas teaches, if it is present in everything, this divinity is present in every man, every woman. Every man, every woman is divine. This is the central teaching. Every animal is divine. Everything is divine. There is nothing but divinity everywhere. And this divinity, is it something to be believed in? Absolutely no. There is no belief system in the Vedas. All the Semitic religions, they are all belief systems. God resides somewhere in the seventh heaven, up in the sky. After death, you go there. There's a judgment day. And there are people waiting there to welcome you all. It's all belief systems. None of those things can be verified. Vedas don't talk about these things. Vedas tell us each one of us is divine. And this divinity is not something to be believed in, it is something we have to verify. Everybody can verify it, everybody can experience it. Then the Vedas teach us that the very purpose of human life is to experience and verify this truth for oneself. And then it says that this reality which we are talking about, it is nameless and formless. And yet it has any number of names and any number of forms. This is the paradox of this reality. And if this reality has got any number of names and any number of forms, we can worship in any number of ways. And this is what is Indian society, this is what is Hindu society, this is what is Bharatiya Sanskriti. The kind of variety and diversity which is allowed, I should not use the word allowed, it is a natural, spontaneous expression of this understanding that truth can be experienced in so many ways, in so many names, in so many forms. It's a spontaneous outpouring of the soul when we understand that the truth can come before us in so many ways and we can approach it in so many forms. This is what actually makes what Bharat is. Do you think Bharat is like this because of the Constitution of India? When was this Constitution born? Bharat as a nation existed as a cultural entity long back, even when other nations didn't even come into existence. So, these are the certain very moot building blocks of the Bharatiya Sanskriti. To this, one more point I should add, that is, if there are so many ways to approach the same reality, that is why the Indian sage, the Hindu sage, he says that no one is a stranger. Vasudhaiva kutumbakam. Ayam nija parovaiti ganana laghuchetasam udara charitanam tu vasudhaiva kutumbakam. For the large-hearted man, for the Mahatma, the word itself is one family. Today in the 20th century, the United Nations has come into existence, which is a platform where the world is striving to bring all the nations together in the feeling of brotherhood. It's all a great attempt. But long, long back in that hoary past, the Rishi of the Vedas had declared to the world that this entire planet, Vasudha, this earth itself, is one family. Does the world accept it today, even understand it today? Are human beings really advanced? Again, the question comes in our minds. Now these are the key points, the building blocks of Bharatiya Sanskriti. Now, when we talk about this Bharatiya Samaj, which has got this Hindu people as its basis and which has got this Vedic system of thought as the very foundation, we can, to conclude, we can say that the entire Indian culture and civilization stands on one factor, that is dharma. Dharma is the basis of this so-called nation, the Sanatana Dharma. Dharma is the science of life itself, which holds everything together. It is not a belief system. It is different from religion. These are the points to be pondered about. So dharma is that building block on which this entire structure of Bharatiya Samaj, Bharatiya Sabhyata, Bharatiya Sanskriti stands. And we should understand, unfortunately, one more blunder of the modern times has been that we have declared India to be Dharma Nirapeksha. Just look at the irony of the situation. That which goes into the making of Bharat, we have made Bharat Dharma Nirapeksha. It is a Dharma-based land. Dharma is the very soul of this culture, the very soul of this civilization, and this we need to make the people understand. If we give out Dharma, there is no Bharat. Swamiji says, let this Dharma go away, all morality, all ethics, all spirituality, all philosophical ideas will vanish. So this Dharma stands as the very building block of Bharatiya Sanskriti and Bharatiya Samaj. Now to conclude, before I finish off, I think my time is already over, I want to make one comparison. When we talk about the Hindu Samaj or the Bharatiya Samaj, why I'm talking about, you may be thinking that why am I using the word Hindu, Hindu, Hindu again? It sounds to be a bit communal, perhaps. It sounds to be a bit racial, perhaps. But we have to understand one thing very clearly. A lot of discussion has been going on in this subject. We Indians should understand Hindu is the only community which is non-communal. Hindu is the only race which is non-racial. Is there any other race which does not practice racism? Every other race practices racism. The Hindu Samaj does not. Every other community is communal. Every religion is communal. They don't accept anyone who is outside their religious system. It is this Dharma-based Sanskriti of the Hindus which alone makes this fusion of all kinds of people, all races, so naturally and spontaneously possible. And one of the beautiful replica of this whole Bharatiya Samaj, we find, it's a very strange comparison, you may think, we find in Sri Ramakrishna's temple at Belur Math. You may think, what is this comparison? Very strange. No, it's not strange. Just now the picture which I have drawn about the Bharatiya Samaj, with Dharma as its center, when you all might have gone to the Belur Math temple, the structure you have seen, when you enter the temple, you go through the Nath Mandir, and finally you reach the Garbhagriha. In front of that Garbhagriha, you stand, there you find Sri Ramakrishna's image installed. Sri Ramakrishna is seated there, and around this image a huge temple has come about. Now Sri Ramakrishna is the embodiment of Dharma. He is the very embodiment of Sanatana Dharma. He is the very embodiment of the idea of Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vananti. He is the very embodiment of the idea of the divinity of the soul. He is the very embodiment of the idea of the purpose of human life is to realize God. He is the very embodiment of that. He is the very embodiment of everything that Sanatana Dharma talks about. Now with this Dharma as the core, if this Dharma is seated in that Garbhagriha, now what happens when Dharma is at the core? Then the whole structure What do we find in the structure? We find all the gods and goddesses of the Vedic pantheon, the Vedic architecture, smoothly blending and fusing the fusion of the Vedic architecture with the Buddhist architecture, with the Christian architecture, with the Islamic architecture, and all of the architectures. What a wonderful fusion we find in the Birulmad temple, and all this is possible because at the Garbhagriha of this whole structure is the very embodiment of Dharma. Dharma makes this possible. Now understand the Hindu society or the Bharatiya Samaj. Why is this Bharatiya Samaj like this? Today we see the Bharatiya Samaj on the surface and many of us get confused. It is a perfect blend of indigenous and the foreign elements, and everything is happening so spontaneously and smoothly. What is letting this happen? Beneath this great phenomenon is the idea of Dharma. That is why we can say that Bharatiya Samaj is a rainbow of multicolored splendor. It is a rainbow. It is a rainbow. In fact, rainbow has got 7 colors, but this Bharatiya Samaj has got infinite colors, hues and saturation with different kinds of combinations. But we appreciate the rainbow. But we forget to see that this rainbow will not be possible unless you have the sun and the right kind of a background. What is that sun and the background which makes the emergence of this rainbow possible? That background of Bharatiya Samaj is Dharma. So this Dharma is the basic building block of Bharatiya Sanskriti and Sabhyata, and in the entire Swami Vivekananda's literature, you will find this point again and again presented in very passionate manner. Swamiji speaks about this in great passion and with great love, because he was one of the greatest Bharatiyas that ever existed on the surface of this country. Thank you so much.